Good morning, everybody. It's 8:35. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Really looking forward to this session, this Women in Tech Leadership session. The subject of today's chat is building trust, culture and momentum in times of change. So without further ado, I'm going to just quickly introduce myself. So I'm Lou, and I've got my colleague Christine and Holly and on the call from Crimson. We've been running the Women in Tech events for a few years now, actually, via webinar, since the lovely pandemic forced us to do so, which was great. We used to do a lot of these events in person around London, Manchester, Birmingham. We most definitely will do some more in-person ones going forward. But when the pandemic hit, we recognised the need to really bring people together in the network and really talk about things that mattered, experiences, journeys, and sharing of information around all things IT leadership, especially for women in tech. It's attended by all, so obviously we like to keep it extremely diverse, and the webinar format obviously allows people from all parts of the country to come together. And what's really lovely is we often have several people on this session who repeatedly join, have shared and built a network around those that attend, and really bring forward some great values and opinions to the sessions as well, and discussions. A little bit about Crimson, if you don't know who we are. We are a Microsoft Solutions consultancy and an IT recruitment and digital recruitment consultancy, specialising in permanent contract and CIO search services. So a lot of IT leadership roles that we've recruited and placed over the last few years. And like I said, our consultancy side of the business specialise in providing solutions for a number of industries, to include house builders, higher education, housing, local borough councils, and lots of other sort of more sort of fifth sector type organisations. We do a lot of work with non-for-profit organisations as well within our recruitment business, and SMEs, but also do a lot of work supporting some quite considerably large global enterprises as part of our contractor offering. So a real mixed bag. And what's really lovely about being part of a digital consultancy is that as a network, you know, from my team of recruitment, and our network is really strong, right? Not only from a recruitment perspective, but in terms of the great team of technologists that we also have working for the business. So Women in Tech, as I said, it's all about being inspired, really about building a community of people who have got like-minded thoughts, but also can really have some no judgment, open-ended discussions, an opportunity to share ideas and approaches to problems in the workplace, help you find those solutions, and obviously have fun and get to know other people in a similar position as yourself, whether you're an IT leader now and can share and want to learn more from your peer group, or whether you have aspirations on your career path to you know, to sort of take a leadership role in the future. Hopefully you'll get a lot of hints and tips along the way. So I'm really delighted to introduce our guest speaker for today, Laura. Laura, looking lovely as ever. I really appreciate the conversations we've had so far, and I'm looking forward for the opportunity to share actually in the content of today with our network here. So thank you very much for joining us. Laura comes from the BT Group and is a senior transformation lead. And I'm not going to tell anyone else about you more than yourself, Laura, because you know yourself better than anyone. So without further ado, do you want to introduce yourself, and we'll crack on through the day. The format for the day, sorry, just before we start, if you've got any questions, raise your hand or drop it into the Q&A. The chat function, sometimes people struggle to see, others don't, but if we use the Q&A function for any questions and answers, or just raise your hand, there's lots of opportunity to speak up, and there will be natural questions that you'll ask along the way, but there's also some natural pauses where we'll reach out and ask you to join in. Anyway, thank you, Laura. Thank you for your offering to speak today, and I look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. As it says on the slide, and as I've been introduced, my name is Laura Murphy. I've worked in change and transformation my entire career, first in consultancy and then across industry at Sky, and most recently at BT Group. I have worked also across an entire spectrum of content areas in terms of change and transformation, technology, data, process, people, culture, most recently the built environment. I am currently responsible for the delivery of the building closures programme, which is the commitment BT has made to close 120 of its buildings between now and 2030, which includes the BT Tower, which obviously has been sold to MCR hotel groups for an awful lot of money. So that is my current job. It is one of the biggest transformation programs at BT and probably one of the biggest in the country, actually. Thank you. Yes, that is the aghast face that I frequently...
I'm ex-BT and I remember a party after delivering Sky Interactive TV at BT Tower, and it was amazing.
Yeah. And I think what's so amazing about that building, right? I'd never really stepped into it before. Let's digress a little bit, because we're going to co-create this session as we go along, right? Which is a key point of transformation, that it should be co-created. What's so amazing about Tower is that, you know, it's clearly an icon. And so to get it as a project is a real gift, right? Because it's got this huge physical element to it. It's got enormous data element to it. People work in there, but also it's this kind of cultural reference point. My children knew that as a BT Tower before I even worked at BT, right? And so actually to have the responsibility of that is both incredibly wonderful, but also rather humbling in terms of what it means to kind of both BT and, you know, London and the country, really. So that's quite a, it's a big thing. So thank you very much to Crimson for the opportunity to talk today. If we can go move on to the next slide. What I thought would be an interesting way of tackling this agenda is to start with a discussion on what is change, right, or transformation. I'm always very keen when I kind of work on a new program that we get our scope defined as tightly as possible. We all know what we're doing and who's doing it. Kathy, I'll come to you in a moment. Then I thought I'd talk about why.
Sorry, I can't see the slides.
So very much. Oh, can't see the slides.
Kathy, if you come out and back in, that can sometimes work. We had this yesterday.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Teams. Thank you, Kathy.
It's always a good thing to see the slides, isn't it? But I can just, you know, talk and talk and talk as we get going, so it'll be absolutely fine. There we go. Hopefully Kathy can see the slides now. And then I thought, having had a kind of, you know, definition of change, that actually we could then talk about ideas on, concrete ideas on how to manage it. Are we having difficulty seeing the slides? There's nothing much to see at this point, because I've just actually said the 3 things on it.
Don't worry, Kathy. There's a big problem with Teams at the moment, I think, with policies and things. But people, if they dial in and dial back out, usually it works. So don't worry. We'll work them out in the background for you.
Lovely. So as we've said on a couple of occasions already, you know, this is a fluid session, and also, you know, one of the key principles that I believe about transformation is that it's co-created, right? I don't believe in top-down imposition transformation. I think that rather, you know, rarely works in terms of any kind of long-term stickiness within an organization. So let's kind of move on to our first discussion point, but we'll stay on this slide. And I'd like you to share with me your ideas on what is change. And please do just kind of jump out, come off mute, kind of, you know, put them in the chat, etc., etc. And just let's have a kind of initial kind of discussion about what we think change is.
Toughly, isn't it? It's one of those general questions that always stumps me. I mean, for me, change is very much around, I always think of something new and often kind of like transitioning from one place to another. It's probably how I sort of best interpret it from just a gut feel perspective. But opportunity is something I usually like to think of when I think of change.
100%. Yeah, I think that idea of something new is very kind of critical to it. Moving from one state to another, hopefully a better state, I would agree. Yeah. That's a key component for me, Helen, so I totally agree. Often when I ask this question, I get kind of responses along the lines of, it's really hard and it's really painful, actually, which I think are genuine kind of responses to the kind of experience of change that a lot of people have within organizations, right? Obviously, it's often I think it's managed quite poorly in terms of the communication of it, or the why, or so on and so forth. I can see we've got another couple of comments.
Yeah, Helen said, for me, change is moving from one state to another, and hopefully a better state, which is a really good way of interpreting that, you know, better opportunity type thought process there. But yeah, 100%. Often it's from something to something new, isn't it? Usually.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone bold too? Helen?
Louisa
Lomas?
and Andrea are typing changes to modify and make things different. Brilliant.
Modify and make things different.
Constant process that we live in. Yeah. Lovely. Those are all really bang on definitions and very much align with our next slide. So if we move on to the next slide. Thank you very much. I am a complete nerd for my job. Anybody who knows me knows how much I love to talk about transformation all the time. I'm really fascinated by the process of it, by the mechanics of it, why, you know, certain programs work, certain programs don't, you know, what we can learn from those, etc., etc. And so one day, just off my own back, because I do this for fun, I went and had a look at the Cambridge Dictionary definition of change. And I went to the Cambridge one and not the place that we don't mention, because I went to this university and I didn't go to the other place. And you can see the definition here as a tripart one, which very much resonates with a lot of comments that we've just put in the chat, actually. And so I'm really struck by those and how that nicely aligns. And I'm also struck by how these ideas build on one from another, and actually how I've done all three in the course of my career, and first started off in kind of one and I'm now doing three. So that kind of, I love this definition for a variety of different reasons. But you can see change takes a variety of kind of forms then. One, alteration. And I think, you know, we can kind of often resonate with this, right? I'm sure a lot of us have kind of worked to alter processes, to remove steps or take them out, or alter particular systems or added fields onto a particular system in order to capture more information. Say I've got a system that's built to capture information about jam, and I add in a new type of jam as a kind of field definition. So I'm able to capture kind of more information about jam, which is very cool. I like jam. So I'm going to talk about it a lot. And you can see how that kind of enables the capture of more information, or to make the process slightly quicker or more effective or more efficient, but it's not fundamentally changing the nature of the thing, right? We can kind of, you know, tinker around the edges, as it were, and kind of, you know, get kind of a result on kind of KPIs or metrics, but actually, you know, that's not a kind of fundamental change to any system or set of tooling. Then actually we go into the idea of substitution, and now we get kind of a bit more punchy, right? If I kind of take out a bespoke monitoring system and replace it with ServiceNow, then suddenly, you know, I've got capabilities that ServiceNow would afford, then my bespoke system didn't. You know, because that's a new tool, I need to kind of embed new ways of working within my organization. I need to upskill different parts of my workforce in order to kind of do that. But again, fundamentally, you know, that is more punchy, but again, it's still kind of alarm monitoring. It's offering me more capability, but it's not necessarily fundamentally altering the kind of state of the thing. And then we come on to transformation. And this is why I love transformation so much. And I think this resonates with the comment that was put in the chat, where actually transformation is a complete change, right? It's fundamentally, you know, restructuring something so you can do new and exciting possibilities that you couldn't do before. Say then I use ServiceNow and embed it in, you know, to enable my network to become fully autonomous, self-healing, you know, automated alarms, AI, you know, that requires my workforce to be very, very different in terms of shape and structure. And also the responsibility that I'm putting on the tooling is very, very different as well. So actually, that's why I love transformation so much, that kind of, you know, idea of making things better. To come on to the next slide. I am an ENFJ personality type. I am number 26 on StrengthScope. That means I am a motivating inspirer, apparently, or something of that nature. Either way, I'm very, very value-led in the kind of work I do. And that's, I think, why I'm so passionate about transformation, because actually I do believe in a kind of better state, that is possible, that you can work with people in order to achieve it. And this highly resonates with kind of the strengths kind of exercise that I've often had in the workplace, which always falls onto these three things, really. I'm very driven by learning, creativity, exploring new options, bringing new ideas together in new ways. That's quite fundamental to transformation. I'm quite deliberative as a kind of person. This is often, I think, why I end up in quite senior positions within organizations on hook for millions of pounds of expenditure, because I'm very deliberative. And so therefore, Senior leaders know that I can reflect through a variety of ideas, of sift them and work out what is the right thing for an organisation at a particular point in time. And I'm also very collaborative. Again, that idea of transformation being a co-created thing. So as we come on to the next slide then, thank you. You can see how, for someone who believes that transformation is a kind of visionary co-created exercise that is about synthesizing new ideas, making things better, and so on and so forth, that I would go for a kind of definition of how you do that job that's very much like this one. And again, that's why I love transformation very, very much. Because if you had asked someone else who was a senior transformation lead to sit here, who had a different set of behaviors and a different kind of set of beliefs, they'd probably go with a different definition, right? And that's what makes the job quite exciting and quite fluid. So just to kind of read this out, this is from Harvard's Business Review and the Art of Managing or Balancing Change. And I don't quite agree with all the wording because I think there is a difference between managing and leading. But by and large, I kind of really like this one. I think it's very effective. Pardon me. So managing change means managing the conversation between the people leading the change effort and those who are expected to implement the new strategies. Managing in light of the organizational context in which that change is occurring, and managing the emotional connections that are essential for any transformation. And this resonates with me in a number of different ways. Again, that kind of nature of kind of co-constructing the change. So it's not a top-down implementation. That makes it more sticky. I think I kind of, I'm fundamentally sold in that. Also, this idea of, transformation being the right idea at the right time for a particular organization. And I think this is probably where, if you look at a lot of the implementation of agile or kind of new methodologies of ways of working, they tend, I have witnessed, people come in as very kind of evangelical for particular kind of ways of working and so on and so forth, and not really taking much account of the organizational context in which that idea has to go in, and therefore really being sensitive to where people need to start on that journey, right? And again, that kind of deeply relates to kind of it not being a top-down kind of imposed enterprise, but kind of working with that organization to understand where they are on their change journey, really good stakeholder management in that point to kind of understand actually what is the right idea or what is the right approach to a particular idea for an organization at a particular point in its trajectory, and actually being able to build bonds with people and very, very trust kind of orientated relationships in order to actually get the psychological safety so that people are able to take risks and believe in you and believe in the journey that you're kind of setting them on. So just before we move on, I just want to pause and ask, do people agree? Does that resonate with people's experience of transformation and change, or actually is it a very different thing that we've experienced going around the table?
I think for me, over the last few years, actually, it became really apparent, and I became much more self-aware of how many different forms of communication are often platforms are often required to ensure that that conversation is being had, but also listened to or understood or embraced. Because as someone who's a very yellow, very in-person, very talky type person, I love that. That makes me, I talk to someone and I get really in the moment and everything. And then it got to the point, especially throughout the pandemic, when everything moved on to Teams at a certain point in time, and we were having to sort of over communicate at all times as our best source. It is a challenge, therefore, because I've worked really hard over the last few years to self-learn about myself, but also about my colleagues and team around, to understand that some people don't want to agree to anything until it's some sort of written form has been sort of, so for me, I absolutely agree with everything you've said in terms of that creative environment and conversation, etc. But it is about how to ensure that you're looking at all the different platforms, and to balance that, I found, is really, really hard. Kathy, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think for me, there's a dimension missing out of this definition. I've just spent
6 years working in transformation projects for the NHS, and you could do all of that beautifully and still not succeed, because there isn't a reference there to the political context, and by that I mean the NHS is basically speaking a set of nested organisations, and if you cannot manage the political interaction between those nested organisations, you're not going to succeed in the transformation. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I mean, I would assume it's a good shout out. It's a high level definition, so I would assume the kind of political context that's in the organisational one, basically. But absolutely that you can only drive forward an idea successfully, right, if you have political backing, and that is definitely part of it, and a very early part of it in terms of going around and shaping that idea. And because increasingly as you go up the chain, right, it becomes less. So sometimes it becomes less of a kind of grow the overall pie, as to actually, if you implement that idea, I'm losing half of my organization, so therefore I'm not particularly pleased about it. And actually navigating that jungle is a kind of really tricky one. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and they can be political with a big P as well, as in literally
yes, of course.
the politics of it.
Yeah, which we face into in a regulatory environment of BT as well, but you must be completely immersed in. Absolutely. Are there any other points before we move on? I can't quite see.
Andrea's just typing a message. So Andrea, for me, it's missing the aspect of everyone who might be impacted by the change. It's focused on those leading and doing the change, as opposed to that reference around those that might be impacted by it.
Yeah, that's a really solid point. Nice one.
Agreed. Great. Okay.
Lovely. Should we move on?
Yeah, let's move on, which is actually a video that we're going to share. So I'm going to dip out and Holly's going to share it so that we play it properly. And we're going to play this.
So just to introduce the video, then, as Holly brings it up, as we go beyond the high level definition of how you'd manage it into a more kind of concrete way, we'll move to this for this section of the kind of talk. This is a nice video. I thought it would break it up from hearing me talk. Simon Sinek, who kind of I kind of take a lot of his ideas on board. My friend kind of Helen can't bear him, so he's a kind of bit Marmite perhaps, but let's see what we have to, let's see what he says and then kind of discuss it afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Hol.
shall we pause it there? Because I know it's quite a long video, just for kind of see what people think about the ideas so far. So thank you everyone for listening to that. The reason why I like it, and he's amusing, isn't he? He's an amusing speaker talking about the laggards and everything like that. I do kind of enjoy it. Is this notion of a controversial idea, isn't it? Because just how of managing change, actually, you know, there's a gap there in that we're not communicating with the people impacted by the change, but then now there's a suggestion actually that we should deliberately kind of actually not communicate in the initial kind of stages of a kind of transformation, you know, in order to kind of drive it forward. And the reason why I like this is because actually reflecting on my career, often I have been quite successful by the idea of working with a very small group to demonstrate success in terms of a proof of concept or a pilot. And there seems to be something that when I label something a pilot, actually, and work with a very small group of kind of enthusiastic individuals, those individuals kind of are de-risked by calling it a pilot, right? It gives a kind of, you know, environment where people can experiment, create, innovate, and essentially a kind of low risk environment, right? Because it's a pilot, so therefore, you know, actually gives almost permission to fail, and then actually demonstrate the success of that, and then drive the organizational change in a big way afterwards. But I'm just really curious to see what people's reflections on that video are.
Don't be shy, anybody. He chuckle, and I think he absolutely hit the nail on the head in terms of. Well, I just like the way he said, just ignore that lot. We'll work on those later. I mean, he was very candid in his approach, but clearly very, very experienced. Anyone else? I'm very shy and quiet this morning. No?
Well, if there are any more comments, let's kind of go on to the next slide then. But again, this idea of pilots and you know, trialing with a small, or sorry, I think we've just done that. But if anybody does want to comment on kind of what resonated or what didn't, actually, please do jump in. Or maybe it'll come kind of later. Lovely.
Thank you.
So
we've got Daniela actually. It's just popped a hand up. She's being brave. Daniela.
Hello. Yes, sorry, I've got my camera off this morning, but I think that what resonated with me is to make people valued in a way of what they can do. And when you go out to your company and you engage only with the people that you know that they are going to kind of reiterate your message is kind of the easy way to go. But making sure that you are in position kind of in the vulnerability in a way of being exposed to people that maybe don't have the same things that you got, and have a conversation that help them as well to kind of engage in the conversation. I don't know if it makes sense what I said, but yeah, I think that is what helped me in the video, I guess.
Lovely, thank you. Any more before we go on? No? Let's talk about, so we've discussed the idea of pilots, then trialing kind of change with a small group of individuals, demonstrating in order to build momentum, particularly when we think about political contexts, you know, being quite data-led and the results-driven in order to build momentum for future success. That's one way of sequencing work. I do always, when starting transformation programs, think about sequencing the work obviously quite carefully, right? That's a kind of key point of planning. And Tara's been really, really interesting in this one. And BT Tara's really been, over the past year, like a massive pilot, the single biggest pilot that I've ever done, in order to develop certain capabilities and innovative kind of ways of working that then we'll be able to adopt across the wider Building Closures program. And so how I kind of thought about sequencing the work on Tower, because we were going to face into doing so many new things in order to exit a building as complicated as that, that has so much infrastructure and so many kind of high value customers for us running over that, was that I started to think about not only the milestones that we had to achieve. Obviously, there's certain things you have to do and kind of a 6-year program, like building supports in different sites. Actions can move from tower to different locations, but also thinking about the capability of the teams and the capacity of the teams. We face into a lot of kind of operational teams who support many different programs, and how therefore I was going to create mini pilots within that program in order to bring certain work forward that I thought the team had less experience in, so we could start to kind of build the knowledge of doing that in year 1, as opposed to year 3 when it gets kind of much more sticky and we're kind of in the middle of kind of mass migrations, etc., etc. So I've thought very carefully around how the work gets sequenced according not only to what we have to deliver, but team capacity and capability, and use pilots very extensively within that model as well. But also thinking horizontally across the program. I've got 11 work streams that's run by a phenomenal team, all of whom different. That's a huge part of transformation, isn't it? Those emotional bonds, bonding to kind of team members' needs at different point in time. The work to ensure that kind of everybody gets a reason to celebrate, right? Some kind of the work stream have a much longer tail, some are waterfall, some are agile, some are business as usual functions, and to make sure that all teams feel equal momentum, an equal part of the success, actually, that all work streams kind of feel kind of equally valued across that as we move forward across a kind of 6-year program, as being kind of really critical to my thinking as well. So yeah, that's sequencing holistic.
And Laura, in terms of those early adopters and those individuals, obviously you've got a team to help drive the change and transformation, but I'm assuming there's an element of a selection process, or how does it work in terms of actually trying to identify those change agents across the business to help pull some of those pilots together? Sort of what is it? Is there a format or a method to how you identify those user groups? Is it based on priority? Is it based on availability? Would you mind just sharing that? I was just interested in what Simon was saying.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of elements of that, actually, according to which part of the program that we're talking about. So Tower at its heart, just to give a bit of context, is a build, move, close program.
Yeah.
And shut Tower and exit successfully in 2013. We need to build the infrastructure that Tower supports elsewhere in various receive sites in London, and then we need to move the customers from Tower to those receive sites, and then we need to tidy up in Tower behind us, take everything out of the building, etc., etc. We also need to move the people who are working in Tower to a new working location.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's an interesting reflection on the Simon kind of video, because the building is sold, right? So therefore, whatever your kind of initial reaction, in a way. But we didn't go and say suck it to the kind of internal audience. I've got a really excellent change lead in the form of Sinead Highland, who did an amazing job. With the teams who are working in Tower, a lot of whom obviously felt grief-stricken, right? Because it's such a kind of icon to BT. So she did an amazing job of going out, articulating the purpose of the program, why, the sale of Tower reflects BT's evolution as a firm. We don't use microwave links in the same way that we did, 60 years ago, etc., etc. And actually, the kind of, new buildings that we'd be going into, and she did a phenomenal journey on that, but did use a business change lead community in order to go out and interact with their own teams, right? So that idea of kind of early adopters, kind of perpetuating that into their own teams. And we had great support from kind of director level down that she built in doing that. So that's one idea on that.
That makes sense.
In terms of the kind of technical ideas that are kind of very complicated, that are new, that we're facing into, I have kind of beat the drum and because they're very deliberate trying to do the job kind of in front of them right now, and etc. etc. But actually, as we've grown over the year, this idea of kind of sequencing milestones according to capability and giving people time to experiment and kind of just get comfortable with a new degree of change actually is kind of really, successfully been sold. And so actually we brought in a lot of the kind of technical network migration stuff early, and the director in that space is very supportive of doing that in order to kind of minimize the risk, really, right? So yes, it's around, reflecting those kind of ideas of people who are kind of willing to go for it, and then kind of building the momentum within the associate teams.
Yeah, and that's a bit of hearts and minds things, isn't it, I suppose? Because if you've got like
Totally.
a core change team, and then you've got other user groups who are kind of working on other stuff around it, and all of a sudden that noise becomes more of a bubble and becomes like, kind of everyone's kind of going, oh, there's lots of things going on around this, then it creates more momentum potentially. Thank you. Okay,
well,
should we move on?
Sorry.
Ooh.
Yeah, it does. Let's move on to the next slide. It does play into this as well. Actually, the idea of, I was just thinking, where these buildings will be set nationwide, and actually the idea therefore of using visual methods on a Teams call in order to kind of articulate the point becomes particularly important as well. And I'm thinking about one piece of work where actually I put the kind of plan up, a single plan on the page, and I was like, and then the kind of penny dropped, right, that we were doing all this network migration and concurrently with kind of customer migration, and wouldn't be a good idea if we moved that bar to the left. And then it was like, yes. So that kind of really jumps into actually having a kind of clear plan and communicating that clearly, actually, and being data led and kind of very risk orientated with the kind of plan as you put it forward. And then again, this idea of co-creating, I didn't say, I want this piece of work to move forward, right? Because I am concerned that the kind of risk profile that we stack later on in the plan then is kind of, higher. It was like, actually, does the team have kind of capability in order to do that rather at this time and so forth, which again comes from data points of kind of workflow, what else they have on kind of the work stack, etc. And that is all dependent. 2 and 3 are very dependent on actually, again, this idea of co-collaboration, kind of co-creation, collaboration, trust, psychological safety, having those relationships that are kind of very positive to kind of drive outcomes, and therefore people trusting me to kind of ultimately, do the right thing by the program and also the team and the individuals, and driving the right outcomes, basically. The whole thing of 1, 2, and 3 are very much predicated on 4. I think change is hard, right? As a job, actually, I won't knock it. There is as much as I love transformation and as much as I'm kind of very passionately driven by it, it's a day in, day out application of kind of, 1, 2, and 3 in order to drive new ideas within our workforce. And, there's a lot of kind of creativity in that. There's a lot of, again, coming back to the idea of it being the right idea for the right the right time for the kind of organization. The thing that's involved by that, the kind of creation that's involved by that, and kind of, working out that application can be rather intense, actually. So I think perhaps in the early part of my career, I was too over enthusiastic. What you said, Louise, resonated, right? Again, I'm kind of sunshine yellow. Actually, my kind of profile is sunshine yellow or kind of really fierce red.
I'm yellow red, but I'm yellow red. I get quite stubborn if they but I was just interested as well to understand any triggers that you can share. So when that part 4 there, knowing your limits, is there any advice or any recommendations you can offer some of the audience in terms of at what point do you have to kind of go, oh, hang on a minute, that's, where are the red flags, which actually then you need to kind of rein in order to continue to move forward? Are there any observations that you can share in terms of those little triggers? And is it noise? Is it feedback? Is it, I suppose as part of the rollout, you're always looking for those feedback Q&A sessions anyway, but how easy is it to adopt and tweak when you start to see the triggers? And what are those triggers usually in your experience, or how have they been?
It's a great question, which has many, many elements to the answer of it. So I guess there can be individual triggers, right?
Yeah.
You know, people who are very, very change resistant.
Yeah.
Because they are individually fearful of change. They're not comfortable with it.
And they're just pulling that bus back and no way.
Yeah, you know, and change for a lot of people can be very, very difficult. So then you're looking to kind of build that relationship, you know, and articulate why and be very data led and trial it, you know. You know, let's work for a couple of times and see if this works, right, etc., etc. And oftentimes, you know, the idea again of kind of trialing something, which then I'll just basically know in my own mind I'm going to make permanent.
And arguably, like the TED Talk says, and Simon says, you know, you're going to focus on those that you know are embracing of it and are likely to be early adopters, and then more often than not, other people will follow suit and learn and build trust in it, maybe through that shared integrity piece, maybe.
But I guess the kind of video doesn't really is very about embracing the new idea and being able to do that within a particular organization, not necessarily working with an established organization in the political framework that someone was saying, where actually I just have to deal with this person because they control, you know, the team that I need. But what I would say, and so organizationally, there's a lot of kind of work that goes on, obviously, with kind of political frameworks and so on and so forth. But what I would say is nothing builds momentum like success.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then if you can get those, again, this idea of sequencing the work, so people start to believe that actually you do have momentum, then people will jump on the bus.
And the wins and the wins are celebrated and all of that along the way.
And publicized appropriately and so on and so forth. So yes, I would say that's, you know, working out all of those relationships and then actually, you know, build, and then being able to kind of accelerate actually and use those kind of wins in order to drive further success.
Yeah, I've got a very black screen here. I'm not sure whether that's supposed to be.
I have, that's the final slide.
What's your final slide, Laura? Because mine's black.
It's my final slide.
Oh, is it actually?
Yeah. And so
then. Okay, explain.
No, that's that was the previous final was my final slide. So actually knowing your limits was my final point, and actually getting your own balance, and when times are difficulty, just kind of retaining your own joy and faith, I guess, right? Because it's a challenging job, and you know, actually therefore you know, working out the way that you kind of, you know, whether it's walking the dog or kind of exercise or, you know, I think, et cetera, what gives you that chance to reflect on it and enable that self-awareness?
I think it's such a huge subject. I mean, it's such a huge subject to try and fit into a session. And obviously we were hoping at the conversations to sort of really be shared with others. Has anyone got any experiences of their own role or change? Kathy, I know you and I have been talking about a lot of the work you've done and digitalizing a lot of products and implementation and adoption of things into the NHS piece that you've worked on, but sort of, is there any question, has anyone got any questions for Laura that you know, they could ask, or anything that you'd like to share in terms of your own personal experience and any frustrations or challenges you've had along the way? And that kind of thing. Kathy, thank you.
The question is around how you structure a change team in such a large program, Laura. Obviously, if it's vast, I mean, I'm very interested to know more about your program. But how has that team been put together, and what does it look like, and how many people are in it, and all the rest of it?
Yeah. So that's some scope and what you kind of need to deliver at the kind of highest possible sense, right? And how you narrate the programs. So obviously, the kind of at the start of any program, which I'm sure resonates with your experience, do a lot of kind of thinking about actually what it is and what you need to deliver, and you know, what is success. And actually, the advantage of Tower is that it's very tangible. Right, you need to exit that building in 2030. And so therefore, working back from that, actually then working out a narrative of, okay, so what are the steps we need to do at a very high level, their build, their move, their close. What does build move? Well, build means building express cooling and new receive sites, you know, kind of making sure those sites have enough capacity, making sure they infrastructure, equipment in there, et cetera, working out which teams within the organisation need to be engaged in that section. The same for move and the same for close. And so actually, and then what I always view of reality slide, basically, which articulates the work streams underneath that kind of high level narration of build, move, close. And I'm infamous for this on Tower now. It's called the coloured boxes slide. And I'm really, really proud of that, actually. And I'll come on to explain why. So there's a single slide, basically, that articulates the kind of key work streams. There are 11 in total that fall into that build, move, close and supporting function structure. And what I did was, it was the very first thing I built really for public sharing when I rolled onto the programme. And what I did was I used that slide unrelentingly with key stakeholders to go, is this right? Does this, does this resonate actually? Again, that idea of discussion, and they were like, yes, et cetera, external stakeholders to make sure that I'd had all the right teams involved in the right shape and structure, but also to really give the program team, of which I've got kind of 11 people, a real clear idea of what it was, right? And how they were going to interact with each other and where the key kind of workflow was across those boxes, and actually the key dependencies were, and who they should initially go and talk to. So almost in a kind of virtual hybrid environment, that became Tower before Tower actually started to build its own momentum and become a thing in terms of successful delivery. So I see that idea of a single articulation that everybody can get. Obviously it evolves, right, and kind of changes, et cetera, but that high level understanding, I think, to be able to then build high level definitions of scope against in a quite a colourful, kind of quite visually distinct way has really helped us galvanize around a single source of truth, and then be able to kind of give the work stream leads their own momentum to go forward. And what I'm so proud of in that slide is that people don't even need to look at the slide anymore, because they just go, I'm box 4, right? And therefore, talk to other boxes, et cetera, et cetera. It's a very, very strong visual definition that people were able to anchor themselves towards. And as we built momentum across all those different work streams, it's been a key it's also been a key element of onboarding new people as those work stream leads have changed.
I think that plan on a page thing is something we use extensively, and it is so powerful, and it provides a common thread as the project moves forward. And because it hasn't got too much definition, if something changes in the detail, you actually often don't need to change too much in that plan on the project.
I think people that quite emotionally, right?
Sorry. Definitely. People are quite bonded to it. And then, well, where is it? Where's the picture? It becomes owned by everybody in the programme.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. We've got a couple of comments in the section. We've got a few minutes, so I'll just read them through now. Thank you so much for that question, Kathy. So Helen, thank you, Helen Lomas. I think a lot of so-called transformation programs are not really transformative. They are more like a simple change from one state to another. Rarely do they bring about the fundamental shift in the work people do. Is that where effective change management can help unlock full transformation instead of allowing people to restrict the scope?
I mean, there's that for one reason or another, and there's an awful, I think, lot of different reasons why they fail, which is why but I think let me see your comments so I can kind of reflect on it in more.
I think also, Laura, thinking back to that early slide around the three types, actually it depends, I suppose, on which area it falls as to how that definition of transformation is understood. Because that could be a confusing matter, I suppose.
100%. Are we labeling what is really alteration as transformation? Right, and that it's never really aimed to go that high, but we called it transformation anyway. That's definitely part of it. There's a variety of reasons, political, why it can fail, but I certainly think your comment, Helen, around effective change management, is key, actually, both in terms of those who are going back to that Harvard
Thank you. And then we've got Andrea, just lastly, what I've usually seen is digitisation, more a technology change with no consideration of process. The change in technology will magically solve all the problems, as it's the technology in the problem rather than the business process, which in most cases hasn't been reviewed in several or more years.
Yeah.
So it's the consideration of that people and process piece.
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, change, if it's going to be a transformation, if it's going to be effective, is going to be holistic, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to impact and really take seriously tooling, people, process, culture. I think, you know, where your question really brilliantly points to is that people often jump to tooling because it's very tangible, right? You know, and it's very ROI driven, actually. I think great that they have achieved something within that kind of financial year and so on and so forth. But I absolutely agree that actually it has to be holistic and consider everything if it's going to be sticky and dry.
I'm going to finish on time. And then Andrea also goes on to say we also need to look at more organisational change management, not just change management, which is what you said. And Helen's kind of added really, when the project or programme budgets are being squeezed, change management expertise is usually the first cut made, sadly.
Yes.
Do you agree or disagree? Okay, thank you so much. Right, we're just Holly's just kindly shared a quick poll. So if everyone's happy to sort of vote on that for us, that'd be amazing. Laura, it's such a huge topic. I'm really grateful for you to share how, you know, exciting a program of work you're working on right now, and we look forward to hearing how that progresses.
Thank you very much.
I know that you're today, it's really important for people to learn from each other, but huge journey that you've been on in your career, and it's lovely to have such a significantly flagship piece of work to bring it all together with, and it sounds like it's going to be a great success from everything you've said. Session, extremely useful, very useful. We'll take that every day. And I know there wasn't as much interaction as is often the case, but actually I think everyone was just so keen to just hear what you had to say, so it's really nice. Thank you so much for sharing. If anyone wants to connect with Laura, connect with Crimson, myself, or if you need any help yourself looking for a new job, or if you've got some change happening within your business and you need some new talent, or indeed if you'd like to engage with our consultancy partner on the solutions side, please don't hesitate to do so. And obviously, if you connect with Laura and follow her journey as she provides successfully over the next few years, it'd be nice to see how that materializes. Laura, thank you so much for your great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.